What is the strangest thing you've seen that you cannot explain? I sneezed my back into place after being couch-bound for nearly a year and a half. Within 15 minutes it felt like that year and a half was a distant memory. Me and a buddy were at his house watching TV and some person on the screen was eating a strawberry. I don't really care for them, but it looked good, and I asked if, by chance, he had any strawberries in the house. He almost laughed at me. We were two 20-year-olds with a higher chance of beer or mac and cheese or Fruit Loops than strawberries. About 20 minutes later, there's a knock at the door and he goes to answer it. He yells out to me to come see something. His mom is standing at the door with one of those low-cut boxes with a bunch of strawberries. He said, "Tell Kim what you said." She looks a little strange and says, "I was driving home and there was a guy selling strawberries out of the back of his truck and I thought, I bet David and his friends would like some strawberries." My buddy says, "Well, you blew it. We all have one wish and you wasted yours on strawberries." I saw a man walk down the sidewalk and stop at one of the free newspaper stands, open it and pull out a spatula, then turn around and walk back the other direction. If he was homeless it would have made sense, but the man was dressed in clean and pressed business casual and had perfect hair and a clean shave. My dad had a really complicated case of thrombosis. It was bad that only 2 hospitals in the country were equipped to handle it. Long story short, he was in intensive care and had to be airlifted to the most famous hospital in Brazil. This process took the whole night. I remember my mom telling me at 6 AM that he was stable and the visitation time would be like 7 hours away, so I went to get some sleep. I don't remember specific details, just a very obvious loving figure that sounded just like my grandpa, his dad, already deceased, telling me to relax. It was not my father's time. When visiting time came, due to my good mood and spirit, my dad asked me if I understood what he had, since doc told us his chances of recovery were slim. Then I told him about the dream. He cried and hugged me. He spent over 10 days in ICU and over a month in recovery, but is healthy and happy today. Never had my grandpa or anyone else visit me before or since. Didn't happen to me, but my mom. She was going through a tough patch, not making a lot of money. Single mom with 2 kids. Was stressed over bills, but had just enough to cover them. Unfortunately it left us with no money. She was a hard worker and would do multiple shifts at the hospital. Still, it was hard this particular month. She was sweeping and prayed for help. As she turned around to empty the dustbin into the trash, there was a crisp $100 bill perfectly laying on top of the filled trash can. No one lived at our house with us. She was never able to explain it. For about 10 years a man would call my home, ask for me, and then ask me if my feet were ticklish. This was 30 or so years ago, no caller ID or anything like that. I would engage him if my family was home. If I said my feet were ticklish, he would ask me to ask the person sitting closest to me to tickle them. He always hung up before we could ask questions to figure him out. Sometimes he would get me on a payphone, like, who'd be walking home from school and a payphone would ring. It was always him. Still don't yet know who it was. A week before my twin brother died, I was in the passenger side of the car under awful thought with visuals that popped in my mind. I was at his house, and it was empty. His door was shut, but I had an overwhelming feeling he was no longer alive. It was the first time I've cried over just a thought. I also had him visit me in a dream after and ask where he was, and he didn't yet know he was dead. Yet I showed him his death certificate and all the paperwork my mom was filling out. I can't yet explain it, but seeing that a week ahead helped me process his death better than my siblings and mom. His 10 years is coming up in March and I've been trying to dream about him, no luck. My family used to travel between Utah and Nevada a few times a year when I was growing up. We often saw wildlife on the side of the road or crossing the road. There's one thing that still baffles all of us, though. It was in the middle of the day, on a long hot empty stretch of road. I was a teen. myself, my mom, and a couple of my siblings saw something scurry across the road. It looked like a huge egg, the size of an ostrich egg, maybe larger, with two skinny legs and feet poking out the bottom of it. We cannot figure out what it possibly could have been. Oh, shoot, I have one. When I was a kid I was awfully sick at one point, completely bedridden. I was super hungry or something, so I wanted to go get my mom, so I fell out of bed, but I couldn't move after that. I was just sorta worming around in agony. Until 4, I want to say hippies, tie-dye shirts, baggy bell-bottom pants, long hair. They just appeared in my room and I instinctively knew they were in a band. One of them was like, "Yo, dude, your mom is asleep. Want us to go get her, yo?" So I just mutely nodded. They disappeared, and a few minutes later my mom came up and checked on me. Years ago, when my wife was pregnant with our second child and about to give birth, my mom came to stay with us for a few days to help take care of our oldest child. One early evening mom asked for a pen, paper and an envelope. When I gave them to her she wrote on the paper, sealed it in the envelope, and gave it to me, saying, "Put this in your pocket and on your open it. You'll know when, she said. 30 minutes later my wife announced it was time to go to the hospital. She was in labor. So we did, and about 9 hours later our second daughter was born at 3:45 am. She weighed 8 pounds, 11 ounces and was 20 inches long. This being pre-cell phone days, I called my mom from the hospital to tell her the news. She answered the phone and immediately said, "Before you say anything, open the envelope." I did. It said, "Girl. 3:45 am. 8 pounds, 11 ounces. 20 inches. I kept that paper for years. When my mom died, I went to our documents safe where we kept it, but it was gone. Doing some door-to-door work, I knocked onto a house who'd only driven past in a city on the other side of the world from where I grew up. As I looked around the deck I was standing on, I noticed a particular window had a view through another window. I distinctly remembered all the details of what was outside the second window, even though I had never before seen it in my life. As the door opened, the lady standing at it gave a bewildered face that I must have mirrored. The first thing she says is, I promise, there is no way our paths had previously crossed." As we got to talking, I was sharing a personal story, of which she finished the last details for me. I was stunned, and she said, Sure you have told me that before. I was tripping out, and ended coming back to the house a few times to just chat, and see where, or if anyone we both knew had crossed paths. To this day I still cannot explain it. Living in a dorm, no roommate. Night before 2-hour open book final, I put my book in the middle of the floor, so I'll stumble over it on the way out. The floor has nothing else on it. In the morning it's gone. I look all over the room, can't find it. I think I'm hysterically blind, so I feel over every inch of the floor with my hands. Nothing. I go get a cup of coffee and come back, still nothing. By now there's only 1 hour for the test. I go anyway, and do the best I can. Naturally when I get back the book is in the middle of the floor exactly where I put it. Probably a prank, but how? I'm not that heavy a sleeper. Nobody took credit for it. Not exactly seen, but it's strange. I was around 6, and on Wednesday evening I went to bed. I woke up, and it was Friday. I remember asking my mom why is it Friday when yesterday it was Wednesday. She said yesterday was Thursday, obviously. I asked her what I did on Thursday because the last thing I remember is going to sleep on Wednesday. She named some activities and I remembered none of that. I never found out why I don't remember the Thursday. I was dating a girl years ago, and she left my house one night after hanging out to go home. She called my house about 10 minutes later. She had curbed her car trying to not hit your dog that looked like a ghost. I was annoyed, thought she was full of it, helped her unlock her steering wheel, and she was on her way. Years later, I was riding with a completely separate / unrelated girlfriend, and I was looking down at some CDs in my lap to try and figure out what to play next. Out of the blue she yells "You're fuck, you're," and then she locks the brakes up, and we slide to a stop. I asked, "WTF are you doing, you're?" and she responded, "You're, did you not see that dog run right in front of us? It looked like a ghost wolf." I looked around, and sure enough we were right around the same spot where my previous girlfriend had also seen this ghost canine / wolf thing, which freaked me out once that clicked. So while I technically never saw it myself, the inexplicable, ethereal canine freaked out 2 different GFS of mine, and none of us have a clue as to what it actually was. I was probably 13 or 14 and my brother, who's 2 years younger, was outside with me playing basketball. My dad was traveling for business, but when he was home he would go out to his shed to work on wooden decoys, and he would always say "Hey guys" to my brother and I. So one night, while my dad's away on business, we both hear "Hey guys" in my dad's voice, and we both say "Hey" back, thinking he came home early. So after we are done playing we go inside to ask my mom why dad's home, and she tells us he isn't. He ended up coming home 2 days later as scheduled. My brother and I remember it clear as day and still can't explain it.